The second race of Eru Iluvatar, the race of men, awoke in Hildurian when the sun arose during the late First Age. Morgoth immediately incited them to worship him, and although many complied, many more managed to escape, heading west. Those who chose to fight Morgoth became known as the Edain. Those who fought for Morgoth became the Men of Darkness, and those who heeded neither were known as Middlemen. Within Beleriand, the armies of men and their style of warfare during the First Age would be heavily influenced by their Eldar hosts. In this episode, we will explore the army compositions and military tactics employed by the various races and cultures of humanity in the world of Middle-earth. Lore details like this are part of Middle-earth's wondrous depth, and if like many visitors to this world you feel inspired to create your own legendarium, there's one way to organize it that brings everything you're going to need in one package. It's our sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is a single program in which entire worlds can be built, and more importantly, it's also the tool that brings your world to life through tabletop adventures. First off, design the world, with features by world builders for world builders. A wiki-like lore database does the heavy lifting, while timelines, relationship diagrams, and best of all, interactive maps connect everything together. This format makes it easy to bring in collaborators and show off your work, but more than that, it makes it easy for you as a GM to take your players through an adventure in your world. World Anvil tracks data live as you play to make it easy, and supports loads of different tabletop rule sets. You can lay out gear or NPCs from your database for all to see, and you can do quick searches for lore when something comes up. And even better, your players can too, bringing everyone deeper into the adventure. Check out World Anvil via our link in the description. If you use our code WIZARDS, they'll give you 51% off a yearly subscription, so support our channel and your imagination by taking a look. Similarly to the elves, who were sundered into three peoples, the race of men would also be split into three, collectively known as the Edain. Each of the Edain would arrive in Middle-earth in different years of the First Era. The House of Beor arrived first in FA 310, and were granted the fiefdom of Dorthonion by King Thingol. The next was House Haladin in FA 312, whom King Thingol granted the Forest of Brethil for dwelling. The last was the House of Hador in FA 313, who King Fingolfin granted the fief of Dor-lomin. Accompanying the Haladin came the small and stooped Druedain, who settled in the White Mountains, with some joining the Haladin in the Forest of Brethil. In FA 463, a new race of swarthy men came to Beleriand, and were granted Lothlan and Targelion by Maethros and Caranthia, becoming known as the Easterlings. In addition to all these groups of humanity, there were also those who did not journey west, nor heed the call of Morgoth or the Valar, but their story comes after the First Age. It was in the east that the race of men first came into contact with the Avari and the Dwarves. As a result of this meeting of cultures, men adopted many Dwarven words into their languages, and Dwarven devices into their daily lives. The same thing happened in Beleriand, when the men of that region came into contact with the Beleriand Dwarves, who, alongside their elven benefactors, they were eager to learn from and trade with. Soon men became the Dwarven race's chief providers of food, working as herdsmen, shepherds and land tillers that fed the underground mining cities of the Stout folk. In exchange, the dwarves worked as builders, road makers and miners, and crafted tools, weapons and armor for their human partners. By studying these dwarven crafts, men became wiser and developed skills of their own, skills that not only extended into craftsmanship, but military strategy as well. Men typically dwelt in scattered homesteads and small villages that were poorly defended by no more than dikes and wooden fences. Before trading with dwarves, they were lightly armed, using the bow as the main weapon, for they had little metal and few smiths among them. However, once armed by dwarves and elves, the warriors of men reached their full potential as tamers of beasts and skilled and fearless horse riders who could act as scouts, keeping watch over the movements of their enemies. If orcs assembled to raid, mobile units of human horse archers would surround and destroy them. It was in this fashion that an alliance between dwarves, elves and men emerged in the northern parts of Beleriand. The Edain learned much of the ways of war from the races of elves and dwarves. The Noldor elves were especially prolific tutors when the races of men fought alongside them against the forces of Morgoth. Men were accustomed to using the bow on horseback, a skill shared by the mixed Noldor-Teleri elves of Hithlum, led by the Noldor king Fingon. Thus it is reasonable to assume that the men living in Hithlum were armed and trained by elves in horse-mounted archery. Similarly, in the northeast of Beleriand, the sons of Fëanor could have taught cavalry warfare and Noldor infantry formations to their human neighbours. There is mention of a wall of spears tactic used by men led by Barahir to save King Felagund at the pass of Sirion during the Battle of Dagor Bragollach. Likewise, the Númenóreans of the Second Age utilised similar and advanced tactics like the Thangale, a defensive formation formed from two closely pressed ranks presenting a barrier of shields designed to be flexible and prevent the enemy from flanking. In addition, there was also the Dunaith, a wedge formation launched over a short distance against defensive formations on open ground. Given that the Thangale and Dunaith have Quenya names, it's reasonable to deduce that elves, most likely Noldor, whose people performed the phalanx of the Guard of the King defending Gondolin, taught these tactics to the Edain. Men were a formidable race. Hador and his son Galdor were stout enough to bear the dwarf helm, while Turin was mighty enough to bear the dwarf mask of Belegost. Elven rulers, in contrast, were incapable of this. Men were hardy and could endure both the frigid cold and long periods of wandering, making them excellent wardens of the north. Thus, men were given fiefs in the north to aid in the siege of Angband. Some 2,000 poor and ill-equipped folk of Beor, without beasts of burden, journeyed west, crossing the Blue Mountains, a journey which hardened their spirits and bodies. They were discovered by the elven king Finrod Felagund, who persuaded King Thingol to grant them the realm of Dorthonion to inhabit. The men of Beor were dark-haired and stoutly built, resembling the Noldor. In FA 402, orcs attempted to breach the pass of Aglon. The sons of Fëanor, Maedhros and Maglor were aided by the sons of Finrod and Beor, who became the first among the race of men to draw swords on behalf of the Eldar. In FA 408, their fourth chieftain, Boromir, was granted the fief of Lagros by Angrod and Aegnor. His lordship over Lagros was followed by his son Bregor and Bregor's son Bregolas. During the Battle of Dagor Bragollach, Dorthonion bore much of Morgoth's assault as Glaurung, Balrogs, and black armies of orcs broke countless elves and men against their endless assault. Angrod, Aegnor, and Bregolos, leading the House of Beor, were slain. Barahir fought near the pass of Sirion beside King Felagund, trying to withdraw south. They became surrounded in the pen of Serek and would have been annihilated if it was not for Barahir, who had his men erect a wall of spears about Felagund. They cut their way out of the battle while suffering heavy losses. Following this, Felagund escaped to Nargothrond, but Lagros and Dorthonion were destroyed. Barahir urged the survivors of his folk to flee to the forest of Brethiel, merging with the House of Haleth. Barahir contested his dominion until all that was left was 12 companions, including Baragund, Belegund, and Beren. Eventually, Sauron discovered their location and slaughtered them all save for Beren. Thus, the House of Beor ceased to be an independent entity and joined the other houses. The House of Beor was armed and trained by the Noldorin elves, performing a wall of spear formation akin to ancient Greek and Macedonian warfare. Noldorians preferred swords and shields, thus it's likely that so did the Beor as infantry. It is likely they did not act as cavalry as they came to Beleriand without beasts of burden, most likely not great horse riders either. The House of Halath crossed the Blue Mountains into Beleriand in FA 312, accompanied by many Druidain. They came in small parties into Assyriand, leaderless, settling in scattered groups. They were shorter than the House of Beor, with dark or brown hair and grey eyes. They were more conservative and secretive, unwilling to adopt new things and customs, choosing solitary lives. They had few dealings in war, but nonetheless were loyal allies and redoubtable warriors, though the companies they sent to battle beyond their borders were small. They excelled in forest warfare, and of all the houses of men, held the strange practice of having many warrior women. The chieftainess Haleth was a renowned Amazon with a bodyguard of women. Though not entirely friendly to them, the Green Elves influenced their lifestyle greatly, including their language of Talisker. Their weapon of choice was the axe, similar to that of the Nandor. Living in homesteads and governing their own affairs, the Haleth were slow to unite. Yet when Morgoth secretly sent an orc over the mountains by the Dwarf Road against them, a leader named Haldad rose. Gathering the bravest and strongest among his people, he built the Gelion Askar stockade, which was soon besieged by the orcs. When their food ran out, Haldad led a failed sortie against the orcs, losing his life and his son Haldar, leaving his daughter Haleth to lead their people. Reeling from the loss of their leaders, the Haleth lost hope, and some, in desperation, drowned themselves in the local rivers. After 7 days, the orcs breached the stockade, but the Haleth were saved by a host brought by Caranthea from the north. The Haleth were offered a fief in Caranthea's lands, but they declined, seeking to settle peacefully in Talath Dernan. Eventually, King Thingol granted them and some Druidain the forest of Brethil as their dwelling, as long as they defended the crossing of Teiglin. Thus, the Haleth guarded the northern flank of Nargothrond, but did not take a large part in the Noldor-Morgoth War. After the fall of Dorthonion, many of the House of Beor emigrated to Brethil, and after Minas Tirith fell in FA 457 to Sauron, the lands of the Haleth became vulnerable. Halmir and Beleg led a mixed group of Haleth and Sindar to ambush and destroy a legion of invading orcs at the crossing of Teiglin. In FA 468, Haldir led the Haleth in the Western Army of the Union of Maithros. During the Battle of Nernaeth Anoediad, the Western Army attacked Angband, and Morgoth unleashed thousands of orcs, repulsing the host of Fingon from the walls. The elves were driven back in a great slaughter. Haldir and his brother Hundar were slain leading the rearguard, as were countless men of Brethil upon the sands of Anfalglith. Following their deaths, rulership fell to Handir, who was slain in FA 495, defending against an orc raid on Brethil. This defeat allowed Morgoth to sack Nargothrond. Afterwards, the Haleth remained in their woods, led by Brandir, whose style of battle focused on guerrilla-style warfare. After this, Turin Turambar came to Brethil, persuading the Haleth to fight in the manner of Nargothrond. When Húrin came to Brethil, he sparked a civil war among their people. A few generations after this, the House of Haleth ceased to exist, and the Druidain fled to the mouths of Sirion. Similar to the Sindar, the Haleth were forest guerrilla warfare specialists, whose preference was the axe and ambush. They were unique in their use of female warriors, but only utilized small companies or bands during war, and rarely beyond their borders. Women could lead the Haleth politically and in war. They seem akin to a sort of proto-Viking or Celtic people, facing war like the Sindar elves around them. The folk of Hador came in 3 hosts, each of which numbered 2,000 heads. They crossed Eriador armed, with many horses, donkeys, sheep and goats. They entered Beleriand in FA 313, scaring the Green Elves due to their high population and warlike nature. They were hardy and of strong build. The tallest of the Edain, they were bold and steadfast, characterized by their blue eyes and golden hair. In FA 416, King Fingolfin granted the House of Hador the fief of Dor-Lómin. Hador himself was given the Dwarf Helm by Fingon, which he and his son Galdor were big enough to wield. In FA 455, during the Battle of Dagor Bragollach, Fingolfin and Fingon marched out of Hithlum against Angband, but were driven back with grievous losses. Leading the rearguard, Hador and his son Gundor fell in battle at Eithel Sirion. The men of Dor-Lómin managed to repel orcs and Balrogs, showing their war prowess in the process. Galdor became the new lord of Dor-Lómin, but 7 years later would fall by an arrow during the siege of Eithel Sirion. However, his son Húrin drove the orcs back in a heavy slaughter. In FA 468, Húrin led the men of Dor-Lómin in the Western Army during the Battle of Nernaeth Anoediad. For days, the men of Dor-Lómin held back the enemy at the pass of Sirion. When Turgon led his host back to Gondolin, Húrin and Huor led the rearguard. The host of Dor-Lómin fought a last stand at the Fen of Serech, forming a bridge of their dead across the Rivil. After killing hundreds of orcs and trolls, Húrin was the last, wielding a 2-handed axe against Gothmog's troll guards until he was captured. After this, the House of Hador ceased to exist, but their people would be the largest of the Edain when came the call of Elena. Of the 3 houses, Hador was the strongest, largest, and most formidable on the battlefield. Given they fought in close proximity to Turgon's phalanx, it is likely they performed a similar style of warfare. They had superior military discipline than the other houses, and the final stand of Dor-Lómin was the most renowned. Númenor would be influenced the most by Hador, thus their military formations and prowess most likely is attributable to them. The swarthy men, or Easterlings, crossed the Blue Mountains in FA 463, having heard rumours of Beleriand's lands and riches, and wanting to partake of them. However, there were those in their ranks secretly under the dominion of Morgoth. They were short, broad, long and strong in the arms, and grew a lot of hair on their face and chests. Their locks were dark, as were their eyes, and their skin was sallow or swart. They favoured dwarves over elves, and held many houses, not all friendly to each other or outsiders. They were led by two chieftains, Ulfang and Bor, when they came across the sons of Fëanor. The sons of Bor swore an oath to Maethros and were faithful. They were given the land of Lothland to dwell, and became known as ample and trustworthy farmers. The sons of Ulfang swore an oath to Caranthia and were faithless, given the land of Thargelion to dwell. The Easterlings fought in the Eastern Army and were trained by the Noldor for war. In this they were given fair arms, most likely forged by the dwarves of Belegost and Nogrod. They also summoned more of their kinsfolk from the east for the war effort. During the Battle of Nernaeth Anoediad, Maethros led his Eastern Army to attack Morgoth's rear. The orcs wavered, with many routing, but Morgoth emptied Angband, unleashing his reserves. Wolves, wolf riders, balrogs and dragons led by Glaurung stormed out, attacking between the western and eastern armies. Many Easterlings routed and fled. Here Ulfang suddenly betrayed the western army, attacking the rear of Maethros. Maglor slew Uldur the Accursed, and the faithful sons of Bor slew Ulfast and Ulwarth. The sons of Bor lost their lives in the process. Ulfang also kept some of his forces hidden in the eastern hills. They attacked Maethros' flank, who was now being assailed from three sides and forced to flee. Victorious, Morgoth gave the faithless Easterlings the land of Hithlum as a reward, but forbade them from leaving the region. Thus, one can assume Morgoth had little influence on their military development. The Easterlings enslaved Hador's children and took their women for wives. The Easterling chieftain Lorgan became the lord of Dolomin. In FA 488, Lorgan's forces, coordinating with orcs, managed to attack a group of elven refugees fleeing Hithlum and captured Tuor, who was enslaved. During the cataclysmic War of Wrath, the faithless Easterlings in Beleriand fought for Morgoth against the host of Valinor. Morgoth was defeated, and Beleriand was destroyed. The Easterlings who survived fled east, where some became kings over middlemen, and fostered hatred that would lead to conflict in the other ages. The Easterlings were a racially diverse, divided, and primitive people. Their descendants would evolve into unique peoples who utilized a wide variety of weapons. They used swords, axes, spears, mounted archers, cavalry, elephants, and even chariots. The Easterlings of the First Age received military training from the sons of Fëanor, and most likely fought in a Noldorin fashion. As infantry, they would have fought with sword, shield, and spear on the open plains, perhaps adopting phalanx formations. In mounted warfare, they most likely preferred horseback archery, similar to the elves of Hithlum, or perhaps cavalry like the sons of Fëanor preferred. They were akin to numerous ancient peoples of Eurasia. Overall, the men of the First Age had a tendency to adopt the style of warfare of their Eldar hosts. They were armed by elves and dwarves and learned from them. A certain level of symbiosis emerged to face the forces of Morgoth. Though speculative, it seems the battle formations and tactics seen by men of the later ages must have been adopted from Eldar of the First Age. More videos on the societies of Middle-earth are on the way. To ensure you don't miss them, make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the